The waves crash violently against the shore as a woman struggles to stay afloat, her screams swallowed by the sea. Michael pulls her from the water, unaware she's the wife of a billionaire with a dangerous secret. But saving her might just cost him everything. What's her hidden agenda? The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet marina. Michael had just finished up for the day, the salty air of the sea tugging at his weathered skin as he wiped his hands on a rag. He liked these moments of solitude after the bustle of the workday. Just him and the sound of the waves, the soft hum of the boats rocking gently in their slips. It was peaceful. But then came the cry. At first, it was barely a sound, lost in the wind. But then louder, sharper, a woman's desperate voice breaking through the calm. Michael's heart jolted. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. His feet moved before his brain had even caught up. He saw her then, struggling in the water, her arms flailing against the swell of the waves. She was sinking fast. He bolted toward the dock, his boots slapping the wooden planks as his mind raced. Help. She needs help. The water was cold and unforgiving, pulling at him as he dove in. He reached her just in time, grabbing her wrist with a firm grip. Her eyes were wide, panicked, terrified. Michael's pulse hammered in his ears as he pulled her toward him, his strength battling against the ocean's pull. You're safe. I've got you, he said, voice hoarse but steady. He couldn't let her go, not now. The sound of her breathing was ragged, shallow. She gasped, disoriented, her eyes flicking around wildly. Who are you? Her voice trembled, but there was something in her gaze, something vulnerable, almost lost. I'm Michael, he answered, gritting his teeth as he fought the current. Just hold on. With one last burst of effort, Michael managed to pull her toward the shoreline, her limp form weighing heavily in his arms. His muscles screamed in protest, but he didn't care. He wasn't going to let her slip away, not on his watch. He dragged her up to the sand, his breath ragged, chest heaving with exertion. He rolled her onto her side, trying to steady himself as he checked for signs of life. He didn't have time to think about who she was or where she came from. All that mattered was getting her breathing again. Come on, he muttered, leaning over her. Her chest rose and fell, but barely. He pressed his hand gently to her back, feeling the rhythm of her breath, until, finally, a shuddering gasp tore through her body. She coughed violently, water spilling from her mouth as she sputtered, her eyes fluttering open. Hey, Michael said, his voice softer now as he knelt beside her, his hands trembling slightly. You're okay. You're gonna be all right. The woman's gaze was unfocused at first, her brow furrowed as though she was trying to make sense of the world around her. But when her eyes met his, something in her softened. A flicker of recognition passed across her face, brief, fleeting, but there. You saved me. Her voice was weak, strained. He nodded, his heart still racing, his mind still spinning. She wasn't just any woman. There was something about her that felt different. It was her eyes. There was a depth to them, a sadness he couldn't place. Yeah, well, that's what anyone would do, Michael replied, shrugging awkwardly as he wiped the water from his brow. You're lucky I was around. She tried to sit up, but her body wavered, and she collapsed back against the sand. I don't know what happened. 1 minute I was fine, and then the next the water, it just pulled me in. Her words were heavy, drifting in and out as she tried to regain her bearings. Thank you. Michael studied her for a moment. She didn't look like someone who belonged here at the marina in this small, sleepy town. Her clothes were too fine, her makeup too perfect for a place like this. She was out of place, like a painting hung in the wrong gallery. Hey, it's no trouble. You're here now, that's what matters, Michael said, though there was a slight edge to his voice. He wasn't sure why he was being so brusque. Maybe it was because he felt out of his depth. Maybe because he wasn't used to strangers in such vulnerable states. The woman shifted slightly, her gaze slipping to the horizon, her expression distant. I don't know how to thank you, she murmured. It's fine, Michael said, feeling uncomfortable under her gaze. You don't need to thank me. She looked up at him then, her eyes meeting his once more. There was something about the way she regarded him, curious, but also wary, as though she was trying to make sense of who he was, what had just happened. A fleeting moment of connection passed between them, but before either of them could say anything more, the sound of an approaching boat cut through the air. Michael glanced over his shoulder and saw a small group of people hurrying toward them. Paramedics, maybe a few curious onlookers. He stood up, his legs unsteady, but still managing to keep his balance. The woman's eyes widened as she saw them. Panic flickered across her face again. "No, don't call anyone." "I'm fine," she said, trying to sit up but clearly struggling. Michael shook his head, his tone firm. "You need help. Let them check you out." But the woman didn't listen. She pushed herself up from the sand and, with a quick glance at Michael, hurriedly walked toward the boat, as if desperate to leave the scene as quickly as possible. Her movements were graceful, but hurried, almost frantic, like she was trying to outrun something or someone. Michael stood there, frozen for a moment, watching her retreat. There was more to her story, he could feel it. The way she acted, the way she tried to push him away without saying a word. Who was she really? Before he could ponder it further, one of the paramedics waved him over. "You good?" the man asked, looking at Michael with a concerned gaze. Michael nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He didn't know who the woman was, but something told him their paths would cross again. And when they did, nothing would be the same. The evening after the rescue, Michael sat on the dock, the sound of the waves lapping gently against the pilings. The sky had faded into a soft pink, and the marina was quieter now, the bustle of the day fading away like the last light. But Michael's mind was restless, turning over the events of that afternoon. He couldn't shake the image of the woman, the way she'd looked at him, the way she had almost disappeared into the crowd without a word. Something about her had stayed with him. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice calling from behind. "Michael, hey." He turned to see his coworker, Jake, walking toward him with a grin on his face. Jake was the kind of guy who always had something to say, always ready with a joke or a quick comment, but today his tone was different, quicker, almost excited. "Did you see the news?" Jake asked, lowering his voice slightly as he sat down next to Michael. "The woman you saved? She's someone. Big time." Michael blinked. "What do you mean?" "She's just a lady who got caught in the water." Jake laughed, shaking his head. "No, man. She's Sarah Donovan, the wife of Nathan Donovan, the billionaire real estate mogul. You know, the guy who owns half the city? His wife. You saved her." Michael's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't heard the name before, but the way Jake said it, like it was something everyone should know, made it clear that this wasn't just some regular woman. She wasn't just a random stranger. "Sarah Donovan," Michael repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. "The wife of a billionaire? No way. I didn't know." Jake leaned in, lowering his voice even further. "You kidding? She's all over the news. Everyone knows her name. She's been a socialite, you know, part of the high society crowd. Her husband is one of the richest guys in the country." Michael ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of it. How could a woman like her end up at the marina, struggling to keep afloat? Something didn't add up. "That's insane," Michael muttered, standing up from the dock. The gentle evening breeze was starting to pick up, but he barely noticed. His thoughts were spinning. He had never been one for wealth or fame, and now here he was, part of a story with someone far removed from his own life. Jake was still talking, but Michael wasn't really listening. His mind wandered to that moment when he had pulled her from the water, when she had looked at him with those wide, confused eyes. She didn't seem like the type to get caught in a situation like that. But maybe that was just it, the kind of woman she was. A life so pristine and perfect on the outside had no room for weakness. Maybe it had cracked, just for a moment, and the water had swallowed her whole. "Anyway," Jake said, clapping him on the back, snapping him out of his thoughts. "You're a hero now. You should be riding high on this." Michael shrugged, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I didn't do anything special. Just pulled her out of the water." Jake looked at him like he was crazy. "That's a big deal, man. You might be in for a lot more than you think. People are gonna talk. People like her? They don't just forget stuff like that." Michael exhaled deeply. "Yeah, well, I'm not interested in being someone's headline." I just want to get back to my work. Jake grinned. Right, sure. But don't be surprised if the Donovans show up at your door. You're probably going to get a reward or something. That's how they operate. Michael didn't respond. The idea of a reward felt strange to him, foreign, like it wasn't even his to take. He just wanted to go home, forget about the whole thing, and return to the quiet, simple life he'd known. But deep down, he knew that wasn't going to happen. That night, after the last of the lights in the marina dimmed and the soft hum of the boats became the only sound, Michael lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The image of Sarah Donovan lingered, her pale face in the water, the way her hand had clutched his as he dragged her to shore. The phone buzzed on the bedside table. He rolled over and reached for it, half expecting some notification about the rescue, maybe another article. But when he saw the name on the screen, Sarah Donovan, his heart skipped again. He hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over the answer button before he pressed it. Hello. There was a pause on the other end, and then her voice, soft, almost like she was speaking in a whisper. Michael? It's Sarah, the woman you saved. His throat went dry. Yeah, I remember. You're okay, right? I'm fine, she said, her voice distant. I just wanted to thank you again. For everything. It's hard to put into words what you did for me. Michael didn't know what to say. It wasn't anything special. Just what anyone would do. There was another pause, and he could almost hear her sighing into the phone. I don't know how to explain this, but I don't usually talk to people like you. My life, it's complicated. You're the last person I expected to be saved by. He felt a strange weight in her words, something more than just gratitude. I didn't do it for any special reason, he said quietly. Just did what needed to be done. Sarah's voice softened. Still, thank you. You might not realize it, but you've changed everything for me. Michael's heart raced, and for a split second, he almost didn't know how to respond. Are you all right? He asked, his voice a little more urgent now. She paused again, the silence thick, before she finally spoke. I don't know, Michael. I don't know anymore. The phone line clicked off, leaving Michael in the darkness, a knot tightening in his chest. What had just happened? What was she trying to say? The following morning, Michael's routine felt off. The quiet of the marina had been shattered, not by the waves or the cries of seagulls, but by an unexpected sense of tension that hung in the air. The media had descended. Reporters lingered at the marina entrance, scribbling notes, snapping photos. A few fans of Sarah Donovan had appeared, too, trying to catch a glimpse of the man who had saved the billionaire's wife. As Michael walked past the group, their eyes followed him, some of them whispering, others staring with awe. It felt like everyone had forgotten how to mind their own business. Michael wasn't used to being noticed, and the attention gnawed at him, making his stomach churn. Michael. Jake's voice broke through the noise. He waved him over with a grin that seemed a little too wide. Yeah, Michael asked, his tone guarded. Jake, noticing the tension in Michael's posture, lowered his voice. You know what this is, right? This is your moment, man. You're in the papers. You're on the news. You got some kind of celebrity status now. Michael shook his head, running a hand through his messy hair. I don't want any of this. I didn't do anything special. I just saved a woman from drowning. Jake shrugged, clearly enjoying the buzz around the situation. Yeah, but you're still the guy who saved the wife of Nathan Donovan. You could be walking into a whole new life. Michael's stomach twisted. The last thing he wanted was a new life, especially one where people treated him like some kind of hero. His life was here at the marina, fixing boats and working with his hands, things that felt real. Not this circus. As they stood by the dock, a sleek black car pulled up to the marina. It was shiny, polished, unlike anything Michael had seen around here. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was Sarah. She looked different today, almost like she was wearing the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her eyes met Michael's, and she hesitated before walking toward him, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete. She was still wearing expensive, designer clothes that had no place in this small, blue-collar world. Michael, she said, her voice a little softer than he expected. She looked past him, as if trying to avoid the curious eyes that followed them. I wanted to thank you again. In person. Michael nodded, his hands jammed into his pockets as he tried to make sense of the sudden flood of emotions he felt. There she was, standing in front of him, this woman he barely knew. Yet something about her presence, the way she carried herself, made him feel both out of place and strangely drawn to her. No problem, he muttered, his voice sounding gruff even to his own ears. He forced a smile, but it felt forced, like his muscles weren't used to the expression. Glad I could help. Sarah's lips parted as if she wanted to say more, but the words didn't come. Instead, she glanced nervously toward the group of reporters who were now closing in, their cameras ready to snap pictures of every move she made. I just need a minute, she said, her voice tense. If you don't mind. Michael nodded, stepping aside, though part of him wanted to ask what was really going on. She wasn't just here to thank him. There was something in her eyes, a kind of vulnerability that told him this wasn't just about gratitude. But she was already looking away, her posture stiffening, as though she were trying to keep herself together in the face of something bigger than either of them. Do you need help with anything? He asked, suddenly feeling like the quiet, simple life he was used to didn't fit into the space between them anymore. He felt too small, like an actor in a play he didn't audition for. Sarah didn't respond immediately. Her gaze wandered over the marina, taking in the sight of the boat swaying gently, the workers hustling by, the quietness that seemed to belong to the world Michael knew. And then, slowly, she turned back to him. I don't belong here, she said softly, almost as if she were speaking more to herself than to him. Michael raised an eyebrow, a faint frown tugging at his lips. What do you mean? Sarah swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I mean this life, she said, gesturing to the surroundings. It's all so empty. My whole life has been like that. Surrounded by people, by wealth, but none of it feels real. She stopped, her voice catching. And then you saved me, and for just a moment I felt like I was seen. Michael was silent for a long moment, taking in what she said. He didn't know how to respond. He wasn't good with words, especially not when someone was laying their soul bare in front of him. He had never been the type of person to share his feelings, and here she was, opening up to him about a world he couldn't begin to understand. Before he could say anything, she quickly glanced at the reporters who were still gathering just out of earshot, waiting for their next headline. Sarah sighed, a deep, defeated sound that seemed to age her all at once. I'm sorry, she said quickly, shaking her head as though trying to dismiss the weight of her confession. I didn't mean to burden you with all of this. I just wanted to thank you for saving my life. Don't worry about it, Michael said, though he couldn't help but feel the strange connection that had started between them, like a thread pulling him into her world. He wanted to say something, anything, to make her feel better, but the words didn't come. Instead, he watched her walk back toward the car, feeling a strange emptiness settle in his chest. It was clear now. Sarah Donovan wasn't just a woman caught in the waves. She was a part of something much bigger, something he would never understand. And yet, as the car pulled away, Michael found himself thinking about her, wondering just how much of that emptiness was something he could ever fill. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of fleeting moments and rising tension. Michael couldn't seem to shake the image of Sarah, standing there by the marina with her quiet vulnerability. Despite the distance between their worlds, he couldn't stop thinking about her, about what she had said, about the way she looked at him, like he was someone she could trust, someone who had seen her not as a billionaire's wife, but as a person. His phone buzzed early one morning. It was a message from Jake. You won't believe this. Sarah Donovan is coming to the marina today. Heard it from one of the guys. She's looking for you. Michael stared at the text for a moment, his fingers hovering over the screen. What could she possibly want with him? He had already done what he could. He'd saved her life. Wasn't that enough? He pushed the thought aside, grabbed his work gear, and headed out to the marina. The air was warm, the scent of salt heavy on the breeze. As he walked toward the docks, he saw her, Sarah, standing by one of the yachts. Her platinum blonde hair shimmered in the sunlight, and she was dressed in a crisp white blouse, a far cry from the casual clothes most people wore around here. But it wasn't just her appearance that made her stand out. There was something about the way she moved, the way she seemed to carry herself like she was untouchable, yet somehow trapped in that same image. "Michael," she called softly, catching his attention as he approached. Her voice was calm, yet there was an underlying tension in it that he couldn't ignore. He stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to say. "Sarah," he replied, his voice steady, but there was an unease in his chest that he couldn't shake. "What are you doing here?" She hesitated, glancing around as if searching for the right words. "I want to thank you again. I thought maybe we could talk? In private." Michael nodded slowly, sensing the weight behind her request. "Sure, follow me." They walked toward a quieter part of the marina, away from the boats and the occasional onlooker. The place was nearly deserted now, the only sound the creaking of the wood beneath their feet. Once they stopped by a secluded dock, Sarah turned to face him. "I know this might be strange," she began, her voice soft but urgent, "but I need someone to talk to. And I think you're the only person who might understand." Michael frowned, confusion clouding his thoughts. "What do you mean? You've got people, I'm sure. Friends, your husband." She shook her head quickly, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Nathan? My husband." Her eyes darkened, a flicker of pain flashing across her face. "You don't know him, Michael. You don't know what it's like. He's not who he appears to be. None of it is real." The words hit Michael like a slap, and for a moment he was speechless. He had assumed her life was perfect, glamorous, carefree. But here she was, standing in front of him, her walls cracking, revealing something darker beneath the surface. Sarah's gaze fell to the ground, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm not even sure who I am anymore. I've spent my whole life living in a world of pretenses, and the truth is, it's suffocating. I've been married to a man who doesn't even see me. He controls everything, where I go, what I do, who I talk to. He's always watching, always making sure I don't step out of line. It's like I'm just a picture on a wall, an accessory." Michael didn't know what to say. The words she spoke felt like they came from a place so far away from his own reality. He had grown up with hard work, simple pleasures, and a family who loved him. The idea of being trapped, controlled, it felt foreign to him. But there was a rawness in her voice that he couldn't ignore. He took a small step closer. "That doesn't sound like the life you deserve." "I don't know what I deserve anymore," she whispered. Her eyes were glassy, filled with something Michael couldn't name. "I used to dream of freedom. I used to imagine what it would be like to just leave. But now I'm not even sure I can." Michael's chest tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, to make her feel better, but the words felt stuck, as though they weren't enough. "Sarah, I don't know what you're going through, but I can tell you this, you're not alone." She looked up at him, her expression softening, her eyes searching his face for something he wasn't sure he could give. "You saved me once, Michael, but I don't think you understand. I don't know if anyone can save me from this life, from him." The finality in her voice struck him harder than anything else. It wasn't just the drowning that had left her gasping for air. It was something deeper, something that had been drowning her long before she met him. As Sarah turned and walked back toward the sleek black car waiting on the edge of the marina, Michael stood frozen, watching her retreat. 1,000 questions raced through his mind. What could he do to help? What was she asking of him? But as the car's engine rumbled to life and disappeared into the distance, Michael was left with a sense of helplessness. This wasn't just a simple rescue anymore. This was something much more complicated. And whatever it was pulling him into a world he didn't understand. A world where the lines between right and wrong, freedom and control, were blurry at best. The days after Sarah's visit felt longer than usual for Michael. The steady rhythm of his work, the hum of the marina, and the smell of salt air no longer felt like the sanctuary they once were. Every time he turned a corner, every time he fixed a boat or handed over a set of keys, his mind wandered back to Sarah. The words she'd said, her voice trembling with that unspoken weight, echoed in his thoughts. She was trapped. He knew it. But how could he, a simple man who'd never even come close to the world she lived in, help her? He wasn't equipped for this kind of life, or the kind of people that controlled it. The marina had quieted down for the most part. save for a few stray tourists snapping photos of the boats. Michael worked on autopilot, his hands familiar with the tasks, but his mind elsewhere. It wasn't until one afternoon, as he was organizing tools in the back shed, that he heard her voice again. Michael. He turned, startled. Sarah stood just inside the doorway, her silhouette framed by the harsh midday sunlight. She wasn't wearing the expensive clothes today. Instead, she had on a pair of jeans and a loose sweater, looking more like someone who didn't belong in the world she came from. Someone who was looking for an escape. I didn't expect to find you here, Sarah said, her voice a little more tentative than usual. Michael wiped his hands on his jeans, unsure of how to react. I didn't expect you to show up again. Her lips parted as though she was about to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes scanning the shed like it was something unfamiliar. The tension in the air was palpable. Neither of them knew what to say or how to begin. After a long pause, Sarah spoke again, this time her voice softer, more vulnerable. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have come back. It's not fair to you. You've already done enough. But I don't know who else to talk to. Michael felt a wave of uncertainty crash over him. I didn't do anything special, Sarah. I just pulled you out of the water. That's all. She shook her head, taking another step closer. It's not just that. It's you. You. You were the first person in a long time who didn't see me as an extension of my husband, or as some trophy wife. For once, I felt like I mattered. Michael's chest tightened, his heart suddenly racing. He hadn't expected this kind of confession. Not from her, not from anyone. He wasn't good with feelings, wasn't good at opening up, but somehow the sincerity in her voice made him want to reach out and say something. Do something. I don't know what you want me to say, he murmured, his voice cracking slightly. I'm just a guy who did what anyone else would have done. I'm not someone who belongs in your world, Sarah. She took another step, closing the distance between them. I don't belong in it either, she whispered, her eyes lowering to the ground before lifting back up to meet his gaze. I've been trapped in a life that isn't mine for so long. I've been suffocated by all of it. The expectations, the appearances, the lies. I can't breathe, Michael. The words hung in the air between them, thick and heavy, like they were both waiting for something to break, waiting for the pressure to finally give way. He hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. The quiet hum of the marina seemed distant now. The usual sounds of the boats and workers faded into a dull background noise. It was just him and Sarah standing in the stillness, the weight of everything unspoken hanging over them. Maybe you don't have to breathe that way anymore, Michael said quietly, his voice rough but determined. Maybe you can start again. You deserve a chance to find your own life, Sarah. I mean that. Her eyes softened, tears shimmering at the edges, but she blinked them away quickly. I don't know how. It's all I've ever known. Michael took a deep breath, stepping forward until there was barely an inch of space between them. His chest tightened, not just with the weight of her words, but with something else, something that pulled him toward her, even though he didn't know what it meant or where it was leading. You can start small, he said, his voice steady despite the swirling emotions inside. One step at a time. Sarah didn't speak for a moment, and for a second, Michael wondered if she would pull away, leave him like she had done the other day. But then, she took a breath, her lips parting slightly as she looked up at him. Thank you, she whispered. It wasn't just gratitude this time. There was something deeper in her voice, a sense of understanding, maybe even an unspoken bond that had formed between them in that quiet, intimate moment. Michael couldn't explain it, but in that brief, quiet exchange, he felt something shift, something that would change both of their lives forever. Before he could say anything else, her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she immediately stepped back, a sudden coolness sweeping over her like a mask she had learned to wear. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her expression tightened. I have to go, she said quickly, her voice clipped, almost guarded now. Nathan, he's expecting me. Michael watched as she turned away, a hollow feeling blooming in his chest. He didn't want her to go, not like this. But he knew better than to press. She had her own battles to fight, ones that went far beyond the simple, quiet life he lived. Take care of yourself, Sarah, he said, his voice softer than before. She didn't look back as she walked away, but there was a part of Michael that knew this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. And when they crossed again, it wouldn't be as strangers. The next few days passed in a strange blur. Michael kept his head down, focusing on his work at the marina. But every time he looked up, he couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was still with him, lingering in the quiet moments between tasks in the rush of the ocean winds. He tried to ignore the nagging sense that something bigger than either of them was unfolding, but no matter how hard he tried, it wouldn't leave him. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Michael heard the familiar hum of a sleek black car pulling up outside the marina. He turned just in time to see Sarah stepping out of the car, her face a study in tension. Her usually poised demeanor was cracked. There was a nervous energy in her movements. This wasn't the same woman he had seen days before. This time, she was on edge, almost frantic. She caught sight of him and quickly made her way toward him, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. "Michael," she called out, her voice laced with urgency. Michael set down the wrench he was holding, concern spreading across his chest. "Sarah, what's going on?" "You look." "I need to talk to you," she interrupted, her words coming fast, almost too quickly. There was a desperation in her eyes that Michael had never seen before. "I don't know who else to turn to. I don't know what to do anymore." His heart began to race as she stopped in front of him, her breath coming in shallow bursts. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of everything between them hung heavy in the air. Her secrets, her pain, the unspoken connection that still lingered after their last encounter. "What's happening, Sarah?" Michael asked, his voice steady, though he could feel the tension creeping up his spine. She shook her head quickly, as if trying to push the thoughts away. "I don't even know how to explain it. Nathan, he knows. He knows about me wanting to leave. He knows about everything." She closed her eyes, her hand trembling as she ran it through her hair. "I can't stay in this life. I can't breathe in it anymore, but I don't know how to escape." Michael stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "Escape? From Nathan?" She nodded, her face falling. "Yes, from him. From everything he's built around me. I've been living in this cage, and I can't do it anymore. But I don't know how to break free." The words hung heavy between them, and Michael's chest tightened. He had no idea what Sarah had been living through all this time, but the pain in her voice was enough to tear at him. He reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder, trying to offer some kind of comfort, though it felt like he was barely holding it together himself. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly. "I'm here. I'll help however I can." She looked at him, eyes wide and desperate, as if searching for some kind of anchor. "I can't stay here, Michael. I can't stay with him. But if I try to leave, I know what he'll do. He's been watching me, controlling me for so long. I don't know what I'm walking into." Michael's mind raced. He couldn't understand the full extent of the fear she was feeling, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stand by and watch her go back to that life, not after everything she had shared with him. "Then let's figure something out," he said, his voice unwavering. "You don't have to go back to him." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly, as though she couldn't afford to be weak in that moment. "I don't know how, Michael. I don't know how to escape him." The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He wanted to promise her everything, to tell her that it would be okay. But the truth was, he didn't know how to fix this. This wasn't just about pulling her out of the water. It was about her whole life, her freedom, and the man who held her captive in a gilded cage. Before Michael could respond, a car engine roared to life in the distance. The sound was unmistakable. It was Nathan's car. Michael turned his head toward the noise, then back to Sarah, who seemed to stiffen at the sound. "They're coming for me," she whispered, fear clouding her eyes. "He's found out. I can't go back." Michael's mind raced. He had to act, but what could he do? How could he help her when he had no idea what Nathan was capable of? "Sarah," he said, his voice low and urgent, "we have to get out of here. Now." She hesitated for a split second before nodding, her fear outweighing everything else. They moved quickly, heading toward the docks, but Michael could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. They weren't just running from Nathan. They were running from a life Sarah had been trapped in for years. As they reached the edge of the marina, Sarah glanced over her shoulder, her face pale with terror. The car was getting closer, and with it, the unmistakable presence of Nathan. She turned to Michael, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't mean for you to get involved in this, but I don't know what else to do." "I'm with you," Michael said firmly, his hand gripping hers. "We'll figure it out together." But just as they were about to leave, a figure stepped into their path, blocking their way. Nathan. The man was imposing, tall, and dressed in a sharp suit. His eyes narrowed as they locked onto Sarah, a chilling smile spreading across his face. "There you are," he said, his voice smooth, calculating. "I knew you couldn't resist coming back to me." Michael's stomach twisted in knots. The tension between them was palpable, like a storm waiting to break. He stepped in front of Sarah, his body instinctively positioning itself between her and Nathan. "Stay away from her," Michael growled, trying to keep his voice steady, but inside, he felt a deep knot of fear. Nathan's eyes flicked from Michael to Sarah, his smile widening. "You really think you can protect her, Michael? She's mine. She's always been mine. And you're just a small part of her story. You think you can take her from me?" Michael's heart hammered in his chest, but he stood firm. He didn't know what Nathan was capable of, but there was one thing he did know. He wasn't going to let Sarah go back to that life. "I don't know who you think you are, but she's not yours," Michael said, his voice steady. "She's her own person." Nathan's smile faltered for a second, but then he chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "You really have no idea what you're dealing with, do you?" Sarah grabbed Michael's arm, her voice trembling. "We need to go. Now, before it's too late." But Michael didn't move. Something inside him was rising, a need to protect, to do something, anything, to stop Nathan from taking her back. The tension was at its peak now, and Michael knew he couldn't back down. And just as the storm seemed ready to break, Sarah spoke again, her voice shaky but filled with determination. "I'm done," she said, her gaze never leaving Nathan's. "I'm done being a part of your world." Nathan's expression faltered for the briefest moment before it hardened like a mask falling back into place. The silence that hung between them in the tense moments after Sarah's declaration felt like an eternity. Nathan's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing, and his jaw clenched with barely contained anger. For a brief moment, Michael thought he might take a step forward, maybe lash out, physically or verbally. But instead, he stood there, frozen as if weighing his options. "I knew this day would come," Nathan said finally, his voice a low, menacing drawl. His eyes flicked from Sarah to Michael, his gaze chilling. "You really think you can just walk away from everything I've built for you? Do you think the world is going to make space for someone like you, Sarah? Someone who's been living off the fruits of my labor, my connections." Sarah's face hardened at the words, but Michael could see the crack in her resolve. He could see the flicker of fear, the wariness of a woman who had been living under Nathan's thumb for far too long. But this time, she didn't look away. This time, she stood tall, defiant, even though her voice trembled when she spoke. "I've lived under your control for years, Nathan. I don't owe you anything anymore." Nathan's lips curled into a tight smile, his cold, calculating eyes scanning Michael's face. "You really think you can protect her, Michael? Do you think you can outsmart me? I own everything. Every person she's ever met, every piece of her life. You're nothing but a bystander. A man who saved her from the water, but you can't save her from the world she's a part of." Michael stepped forward, his heart racing. There was an icy, suffocating pressure building around him, the tension between the three of them nearly unbearable. He had no idea how to fight back, how to win against a man like Nathan, someone with wealth, power, connections. But he wasn't going to let Nathan take Sarah again. He couldn't. "I don't care about your money, Nathan. I care about her. And I don't care who you think you are. She doesn't belong to you." Michael's voice was steady, even though his heart pounded with every word he spoke. Nathan's smirk faded, his eyes narrowing as he stepped closer. "You really have no idea what you're dealing with, do you?" he said, voice low, menacing. "You think you can just walk into my world and pretend you know how things work? You think I'm going to let her go that easily?" Sarah's voice cut through the thick air. "You never had control over me," she said quietly but firmly. "Not really. You've controlled everything around me, but you can't control my decision. I'm done, Nathan. I'm done being your puppet. And if you try to stop me, you'll lose more than you think." For the first time, Nathan faltered, his posture shifting as if he wasn't sure how to react. The facade he'd been wearing seemed to crack, just a little, but only for a second. With a sharp movement, Nathan pulled out his phone and dialed a number, speaking in a clipped tone, too low for Michael to hear. Michael's stomach sank as he realized what was happening. This was never going to be as simple as just walking away. There were people behind Nathan. People who could make life for Michael and Sarah far more difficult than they could ever imagine. Sarah's face hardened again, her eyes flashing with determination. "We can't stay here. They'll find us, Michael. If we don't leave now, it's over." Michael knew she was right. He didn't have the answers, didn't know how they could outrun Nathan's empire, but he couldn't let fear stop them. They had one shot. "Let's go," Michael said urgently, pulling her toward the far side of the marina, away from Nathan and the danger creeping up behind them. Just as they reached the dock, a black SUV appeared, and Michael's heart dropped. More of Nathan's people. They weren't going to make it out of here without a fight. He felt the weight of the decision crashing down on him. He didn't have a plan, no way out. He was just a man trying to protect someone who had lived through more than he could ever understand. Before they could make it to the boat, Nathan's voice rang out behind them, cold and final. "Don't think you can run away, Sarah. You can't outrun what's already yours. I'll find you. And when I do, it will be worse for both of you." Sarah stopped in her tracks, her back to Nathan. She took a deep breath, her eyes flashing with a strength that had been hidden beneath years of control. "I don't care anymore, Nathan. You can't keep me here. I'm walking away, and nothing you do can change that." Michael, standing beside her, watched Nathan's anger build. The billionaire took a step forward, his eyes blazing. But Sarah didn't flinch. She was done running. She was done hiding. And as Michael looked at her, he realized that this wasn't just a moment of escape. It was her first step toward something bigger, something real. Before Nathan could respond, Sarah pulled Michael toward the boat. As they stepped onto it, Michael turned to face Nathan one last time. "We'll figure this out," Michael said, his voice clear. "You've lost. You just don't know it yet." Nathan's eyes blazed with fury as they sped away, but Michael didn't look back. He didn't need to. The course had been set. As the boat sailed into the darkening waters, Michael felt a strange sense of finality. The future was unknown. They didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, Sarah had taken control of her own fate. And Michael, by her side, was ready to face whatever came next, together.